Teletubbies, you know, Teletubbies? Teletubbies, yeah, these Teletubbies. I don't know what else to say about them except they're Teletubbies. So a bit of an explanation of what we've got here. Well, over the past 2 or so years, I have been hunting for this specific type of 1990s, mid-1990s dancing Teletubby toy, and they're a little bit hard to come by actually. Yeah, there's not many of them that still work, and amazingly enough, you'll notice that I've just got a bunch of Poes and a bunch of Lalas, and that's because Tinky Winky and Dipsy, well, they are few and far between, and whenever you can find them, people seem to want too much money for them. I do happen to have one Dipsy. I nearly said Tinky Winky. I have got one Dipsy, but that was by pure chance because it was actually labelled as a Lala. I know, problems. This isn't even all of them. I've been collecting them for a fair while, and the reason why I've been collecting them was basically because I knew one day I would find a use for them. And until that point, I just, without questioning it, you know, bought one a month, maybe 2 a month, and it's sort of like having a phone contract, but instead of having a phone, you just have a load of dancing Teletubbies. Since the museum had opened and become a bit of an entity, these were basically just sitting about doing nothing, and they were actually just up everywhere. Wherever you turn, there's a random Teletubby and stuff. And I knew at one point I would finally find a project for these, and I think this is finally time. So there's a festival that's happening on the first week of September in Ramsgate. It's called the Ramsgate Festival of Sound. It's happened for the last fair few years, every year. It's basically just a bunch of different events and stuff like that, and a sonic trail around Ramsgate, basically focusing on a load of different art pieces and stuff like that, and performances and stuff about sound, be it music or just making a whole lot of noise. And yeah, this year I'm making something for it. Part of the brief about the sound piece or the sound art or whatever is it had to be something a bit about the sea. And it got me thinking, what the heck could I make that's a bit about the sea? And then, yeah, it's just struck me. Teletubbies. Teletubbies. Yes, I know it's a bit crazy, but let me explain, because this is only half of the aspect. I'll start by telling you the title of the machine. Well, it's called the Teletubby Tidal Wave, and I'm afraid that's where the similarity with the sea kind of stops, because yeah, there's nothing else to do with the sea about this thing except it's called the Teletubby Tidal Wave. But why is it called a tidal wave? Well, you know when you see loads of people in a stadium, like in a football kind of thing, and they all do that weird wave where they all follow each other like this? Well, it's sort of like cascades down and makes a really cool kind of fluid motion just down to loads of people doing that weird stadium wave thing. But instead of a stadium wave, well, it's going to be Teletubbies, because if you don't know, these things have quite some moves. And this is going to be an outdoor installation. It's by the Boat and Pool in Ramsgate, which is also a pub called the RAMSGATE Arms. And there's a big old grass mound, and it seems like, yeah, the perfect idea was shoving a bunch of Teletubbies in their kind of natural habitat, which was a grass mound. So there's a few things that we need to think about here. If there's going to be a massive long line of Teletubbies that just get put in and put out whenever it's being set up. If it rains, it needs to be able to be moved quick, this, that and the other, by people who are on hand and just making sure that it's all working and stuff like that. Well, it needs to be made in such a way that it is a little bit portable, it's a bit easy to manage, and it's just not gonna break. So the first question is, how are we gonna get the Teletubbies to basically kind of cascade down doing little wavy things? Well, we're going to need some electronics. One nice and easy approach would be using a microcontroller like an Arduino or something like that, but I'm not gonna do that. Come on, there's funner ways of doing this. So what we're actually gonna use are these things called serial to parallel shift registers. Basically what a serial to parallel shift register is it's something that takes a serial data stream being a stream that goes ones and zeros one after the other, and transfers that over into a parallel piece of data. And a parallel piece of data is basically ones and zeros next to each other. That means there's no time, they don't have to be one after the other. The advantage of having a serial data stream is you only need one wire, because you're just telling it to go through a single cable. The problem with the parallel shift register is you're putting them all next to each other. This means every single bit needs its own wire. I've done numerous projects in the past with serial to parallel shift registers, including a video on making a drum sequencer, and the link to that is below. I'd recommend you watching that if you don't have a fudging clue what the fudge it is and how that is gonna like help us in making a Teletubby tidal wave. This right here is a relay-based step sequencer that I put together a couple of months ago, and funnily enough, this is in some weird shape or form actually a serial to parallel shift register in its weird little way. If you haven't seen this video already, you'll see that, yeah, basically all of this is just a bunch of relays being electromagnetic switches. So we'll turn it on first. And what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to send a bit in. You can see that it's actually going one after the other down these separate boards of relays. These boards are what are called flip-flops, and they are basically the elements of a serial to shift register, the thing that we're going to be using. If you haven't watched this video already and you want to see what flip-flops and all that jiff-jaff are, then go and check this out. The links are also in the description. So if you imagine each of these modules are actually Teletubbies. So if we tell the first Teletubby to wave, it's actually going to tell the next one to wave, and then that one's going to tell that one to wave, and it sort of cascades down in a sort of tidal wave kind of fashion. You'll notice there is one problem here. It actually goes around in a circle, which might be useful, but we want to make this interactive. This one right now is telling this one to do its thing. So what if we disconnect this one from this one? We'll just do that now. And it stops. So every time I push this button, it sends a little light down the stream. If I push it multiple times, well, it just sends whatever I send it down the stream. So you can hopefully see how this cascading effect of the shift register will help us by actually making a cascading effect with Teletubbies. The problem with the relay sequencer design approach is it's a little bit unreliable. Sometimes it drops bits and sometimes it doesn't fully work. But thankfully, thanks to 1970s technology, I know, they have squeezed that whole kind of design down into a single chip. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these 1970s chips to basically cascade down the Teletubbies, telling the Teletubbies to, you know. The specific shift register we're actually going to be using is quite a popular one. It's called the 74HC595, and it is an 8-bit shift register, which means it has 8 bits out. So that means we can actually cascade 8 Teletubbies with a single chip. I did a builder's live stream a few weeks back testing a circuit with these chips. If you imagine the LEDs that you're looking at right now as Teletubbies, they're all wired into the outputs of that shift register. Every time I send a little button like I did with the relay sequencer in there, well, those LEDs lit up and then kind of cascaded down to the end. The only downside to this is it only has 8 outputs. However, if you wire the last output also into the input of another chip, well, it cascades onto that chip. If you keep on doing that, well, you can actually make the same cascading circuit, well, an unlimited length if you wanted to. Well, you can't, because it'll be impossible to make an unlimited length, but it could be damn long. The next thing we need to do is we need to decide how to get this circuit to talk to Teletubbies. And how I'm going to do that is using relays, because it's going to be a nice, reliable, clicky, you're going to get that kind of electromechanical sound. So we're going to put relays on the outputs of the shift registers. That means we can pretty much plug the power into the Teletubbies through the relays, and that'll be powered by this cascading circuit, basically telling the relays when to turn on. The next thing we have to do after we have that relay that turns it on, well, we need another relay after that to actually push its finger. So all I did is I cut the wires coming off to the finger button that basically makes it dance, and I plugged that into the next relay. The reason they can't be on the same relays is because the Teletubby needs to boot up before you push the button or it freezes. But the great thing is you can share the push button relay with the turn on of the next Teletubby. So we end up only having 1 relay per Teletubby, but the Teletubbies are actually talking to 2 relays, if that makes sense. After this, I really quickly bashed together a circuit board to give this whole idea a test. So I've just put one of the tidal wave boards together, and really annoyingly, I've made a couple of rather stupid mistakes. I stupidly didn't wire in a clock in pin to any of these, so I've got it soldered underneath the bottom, and I also haven't got a cascade output. And that means this one can't talk to the next one to tell the other one to start cascading. But it's okay, because with this we're able to test it and double check everything's works, so it's okay. So I'm just going to plug it in. Now I want to send the right pin. This will be wired into a button into let's say 5 volts. Oh yeah, look at that. We're able to cascade 1s and 0s right down the line. When it's not being selected, there's constantly just saying to the next one, nothing, 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 and then suddenly, If you look closely at the relays, you'll see they are moving as well. You can obviously slow this down a bit as well. Let's just send one in slowly. So the next thing we need to do with this is plug it into some Teletubbies and see what the fudge happens. So now I have wired up one of the Teletubbies. And now it'll do the dance. So right now I'm going to see if I can get more Teletubbies wired into the main frame. Now after all of that, I repeated it 7 times. However, annoyingly, one of them doesn't seem to work. I need to get it fixed. So the question is, are you ready for a 7 Teletubby tidal wave? I think you are. I've got a button over here that's just triggering the tidal wave. Oh, so good. Oh, that's the one. So that's it today regarding the Teletubby tidal wave. Pop back in about a week and a half or 2 and these should be all wired up to circuits and we should be on the home stretch trying to make it all rugged and just ready to be exhibited. So like I said, this is being built for the RAMSGATE Festival of Sound and we are coinciding an opening on the Thursday of the RAMSGATE Festival of Sound, which is the 2nd of September, as that is when they have the Sonic Trail, which is basically where you walk around and you go to all these different sounds and exhibits in different parts of the town, as well as the Teletubby tidal wave. And the tickets for this Museum's Not Obsolete's open day on the 2nd is now available over on the website. So if you want to book that, go and check it out. However, I've also set up the current setup with 7 Teletubbies over in the museum today. So for people coming on this Sunday, well, you can go and play on it. There's a handful of tickets left for this Sunday, which I think is even tomorrow. So if you're interested in popping over to this Museum's Not Obsolete tomorrow, then go and check it out. The links are below. Also, not to mention, after the RAMSGATE Festival of Sound, well, this is going to get set up permanently down the hallway in the museum, so it'll be able to be played and you can send a whole Teletubby tidal wave. Anyway, thanks a lot to the RAMSGATE Festival of Sound, as well as the generous Patreon support for making things like this possible. If you want to support these kind of videos and all of these ventures, then go and check out on Patreon or YouTube membership. The links are below. There's loads of extra content and stuff like that, as well as full-length builders live streams on projects, including this one down here where we were figuring it out on the breadboard. Anyway, until next time, I'm Look Mum No Computer. This museum is not obsolete, and if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe and don't be scared to try it. Maybe don't collect dodgy old Teletubbies though.